Imagine this. You're 85 years old, dying, and you realize something terrifying. You live the same day for 30,000 days straight. Same routines, same frustrations, same unfulfilled dreams, collecting dust in the corners of your mind. The person staring back at you in the mirror has aged, but nothing else has changed. The promises you made to yourself to finally start that project, to leave that soul-crushing job, to become who you always knew you could be, remain broken promises, archived in the graveyard of good intentions. Screenshot this next part. You'll want to remember it when you're lying to yourself later. This isn't a nightmare. It's your Tuesday, and your Wednesday, and every day until you die. Still reading? Good. Most people already scrolled away. They're not ready for what comes next. You've witnessed it yourself, haven't you? That friend who's been talking about writing a novel for the past decade, but has never written more than a page. The colleague who complains endlessly about their toxic relationship, but stays year after year. Your own reflection, perhaps, promising that next Monday, next month, next year will be different, but it never is. Here's the unsettling truth. Despite having access to more information, resources, and opportunities than any generation in human history, most people will die having lived essentially the same year 75 times and called it a life. They'll carry the same mental patterns, the same limiting beliefs, the same comfortable miseries from cradle to grave. But why? Why do intelligent, capable human beings who have conquered continents, decoded the human genome, and touched the stars, remain prisoners of their own psychology? Why does the gap between who we are and who we want to be feel like an unbridgeable chasm? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about motivation. It's not about willpower. It's not even about fear, though fear plays its role. The real reason runs deeper, threading through the very fabric of your identity, your neurology, and the invisible scripts that govern your every decision. Think about the last time you tried to change something significant about yourself. Remember that surge of determination, the clarity of vision, the absolute certainty that this time would be different. And then, what happened? Life happened. Old patterns reasserted themselves. The gravitational pull of your familiar self dragged you back to square one. You're not alone in this. Studies show that 92% of people abandon their New Year's resolutions by February. 70% of organizational change initiatives fail. Let that sink in. 7 out of 10. You're probably in the 7. The vast majority of people who lose weight gain it all back within 2 years. These aren't failures of individual character. They're symptoms of something far more fundamental. Here's where it gets dark, really dark. What if I told you that your inability to change isn't a bug in your system, but a feature? What if the very mechanisms that keep you safe, sane, and socially connected are the same ones that trap you in an endless loop of sameness? What if the problem isn't that change is hard, but that staying the same is unconsciously exactly what part of you wants? You see, buried beneath your conscious desires for growth and transformation lies an ancient operating system, one that values survival over fulfillment, predictability over possibility. This system doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your potential. It cares about one thing only, keeping you alive by keeping you the same. Read that again. Your brain thinks change equals death, and it's winning. But here's where it gets interesting. The very fact that you're confronting this question, why don't people change, suggests something remarkable. It suggests that somewhere within you, a rebellion is stirring. A part of you refuses to accept that this is all there is. A part of you knows that transformation isn't just possible, it's your birthright. The question is, will you keep scrolling and forget this in 30 seconds? Or will you finally admit you're the problem? What you're about to discover isn't just why people don't change. You're about to uncover the hidden architecture of human stagnation, and more importantly, the secret passages that lead to genuine transformation. But be warned, once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Once you understand the game being played in your own mind, you'll face a choice that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The comfortable prison of your current self, or the terrifying freedom of who you could become. The human mind is a masterpiece of deception, and you are both the deceiver and the deceived. Carl Jung understood this when he wrote about the shadow, the dark repository of everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. If you're feeling attacked right now, that's your shadow talking. Listen up. But the shadow isn't just about repressed darkness. It's about repressed potential. Every time you say, "I'm not the kind of person who," you're not stating a fact. You're casting a spell, binding yourself to a limited version of who you could be. Think about it. Your identity, this collection of stories you tell yourself about who you are, isn't some objective truth written in stone. It's a psychological construction, a narrative you've been unconsciously writing since childhood. I'm not good with numbers. I'm an introvert. I'm not creative. These aren't descriptions, they're prescriptions. They're commands your unconscious mind follows with religious devotion. MIT researchers confirmed this. Your identity is literally programming your failure. Every single day, Schopenhauer exposed the cosmic joke. You think you're driving the car, plot twist, you're tied up in the trunk. Your desires, your fears, your automatic responses, they all emerge from a place deeper than conscious thought. You think you're the CEO of your mental corporation, but you're really middle management at best, carrying out orders from a board of directors you've never met. This is where the real problem begins. Your brain, that 3-pound universe between your ears, operates on a fundamental principle: energy conservation. From an evolutionary perspective, change is dangerous. Change means uncertainty. Uncertainty means potential death. So your brain has developed an elaborate security system designed to keep you exactly where you are. This next part will mess you up. Scientists discovered your brain gets you high on being boring. Literally. Same thoughts, true dopamine hit. You're a junkie for your own mediocrity. Your brain literally gets you addicted to your own patterns. Every familiar thought, every repeated behavior, every predictable emotion releases a small hit of neurochemicals that whisper, "This is safe. This is known. Stay here." You're a junkie. Your drug, being exactly who you were yesterday, still think you're in control? Sartre would have called it bad faith, the act of lying to yourself about your own freedom. You pretend you have no choice, while secretly being the architect of your own prison. I have to stay in this job. I can't leave this relationship. This is just who I am. These aren't truths, they're choices masquerading as facts. But here's where it gets truly insidious. Your ego, that construction of self you've spent decades building, has a vested interest in your non-change. Why? Because real change means ego death. The person you've been must die for the person you could become to be born. And your ego will fight that death with every weapon in its arsenal: rationalization, procrastination, self-sabotage, sudden contentment with the status quo. Viktor Frankl, surviving the Nazi concentration camps, discovered something that will haunt you forever. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But here's what most people miss. We almost always have the power to change our situation. We just convince ourselves we don't, because changing ourselves feels like psychological suicide. Consider the mechanics of what psychologists call learned helplessness. When subjected to repeated adverse conditions, animals and humans eventually stop trying to escape, even when escape becomes possible. The cage door opens, but the prisoner stays inside. Not because they can't leave, but because they've internalized the bars. You've likely done this to yourself countless times. Failed attempts at change create scar tissue in your psyche. Each failure reinforces the narrative. This is who I am. Change isn't possible for someone like me. You become both the guard and the prisoner in your own psychological detention center. Take a breath. I know that hit different. It's supposed to. Nietzsche understood this when he proclaimed that man is something to be overcome. But overcoming yourself isn't about willpower or positive thinking. It's about recognizing that your current self is a fiction, a story you've been telling so long you've forgotten you're the author. Alan Watts dropped this bomb. You die every 5 minutes. The question is, why do you keep resurrecting the same loser? Yet most people live as if they signed a lifelong contract to remain exactly who they were at some arbitrary point in their past. Here's what will mess you up. Every memory you have is fake. Neuroscience proved it. You're not even the person you remember being. Neuroscience has proven that every time you recall a memory, you literally rewrite it. You're not remembering the event. You're remembering the last time you remembered it. Your past, the very foundation of your identity, is as fluid as your future, but you treat it as scripture. This is the hidden problem. You're not struggling against external circumstances. You're wrestling with a ghost, the ghost of who you think you are. And this ghost has one primary weapon, the illusion of permanence. It whispers that change is for other people, that your patterns are your essence, that stepping outside your comfort zone is a betrayal of your true self. But what if your true self is the very thing keeping you from becoming who you're meant to be? What if the voice saying, "This is who I am," is not your friend but your jailer? What if the first step to change isn't adding something new, but recognizing that who you think you are is already a fiction? So why not write a better story? The roots of your stagnation run deep, through layers of psychology, neurology, and philosophy. But roots, no matter how deep, can be pulled up. The question is, are you ready to see just how much of your life is built on invisible assumptions? Are you prepared to discover how your own mind has been conspiring against your transformation? Because once you see the cage, you can't pretend it's a home anymore. You're haunted by ghosts. Plot twist, they're all the versions of you that you murdered with excuses. Save this post right now. Your future self will thank you or hate you for ignoring it. These unlived lives don't simply disappear. They accumulate in the shadows of your psyche, creating a psychological pressure that manifests in ways you'd never suspect. That chronic anxiety you can't quite explain? That's the weight of potential pressing against the walls of your current existence. That vague sense of dissatisfaction that follows you through even your happiest moments. That's the voice of who you could have been, whispering through the cracks of who you settled for being. The consequences of non-change aren't neutral. There's no such thing as standing still in life. You're either growing or dying, expanding or contracting. And when you choose not to change, you're not maintaining the status quo. You're actively deteriorating, one compromised day at a time. Your brain literally deletes the person you could become every single day. It's called synaptic pruning, aka dream murder. Your brain literally eliminates neural pathways you don't use. Every time you say, "I can't," every time you choose the familiar over the possible, you're not just missing an opportunity. You're physically rewiring your brain to make future change even harder. You're performing neurological surgery on yourself, removing the very capacities you'd need to become someone different. A Harvard neuroscientist called this self-induced lobotomy. Yeah, sit with that. But the personal consequences pale compared to the collective cost. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, warned of a society that would come to love its oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. He was describing a dystopia, but he was also describing your daily life. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're not just imprisoning yourself, you're contributing to a culture of stagnation. Think about the last time you were in a group where someone suggested a bold change, a new way of doing things. What happened? The group's immune system activated. That's not how we do things here. That seems risky. Let's stick with what works. This is social homeostasis in action. The collective resistance to change that keeps entire organizations, communities, and societies trapped in outdated patterns. Tag that friend who keeps saying, "That's just how things are." They need to see this. You become complicit in this. Your non-change gives others permission to remain static. Your settling becomes contagious. You create a field of stagnation around you, affecting your children, your friends, your colleagues. They look at you and think, if they're not changing, why should I? The tragedy isn't just personal, it's generational. The cognitive biases multiply like viruses. Confirmation bias ensures you only notice evidence that supports your current identity. The sunk cost fallacy convinces you that because you've invested so much in being who you are, you must continue. The availability heuristic makes you overestimate the risks of change while underestimating the risks of staying the same. Your comfort zone isn't comfortable, it's numbing. Like a psychological anesthetic, it doesn't eliminate pain, it eliminates feeling. You trade the sharp pain of growth for the dull ache of stagnation. You choose chronic low-grade suffering over acute, transformative discomfort. Write this down. Comfort is just death in a prettier package. Here's what's truly sinister. Your brain becomes addicted to your problems. Those familiar struggles, those same complaints you've been voicing for years, they become part of your identity. Without them, who would you be? So you unconsciously maintain them, like a curator preserving exhibits in a museum of your own dysfunction. Warning, this next insight destroyed me for weeks. The philosopher Kierkegaard wrote about the sickness unto death. Not physical death, but spiritual death, the death that comes from refusing to become who you're meant to be. This sickness manifests as despair, but a despair so familiar you mistake it for normalcy. You're not depressed in the clinical sense. You're suffering from something deeper, the quiet desperation of a life unlived. Watch how this plays out in your relationships. You attract people who reinforce your static self-image. You repel those who challenge you to grow. Your social circle becomes an echo chamber of mutual stagnation. Everyone plays their assigned roles in a drama that never evolves, season after season of the same show, the same conflicts, the same resolutions that resolve nothing. The workplace becomes a particularly cruel theater for this tragedy. You spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, performing a version of yourself that died years ago. You've become so good at playing this role that you've forgotten it's a performance. The paycheck isn't just buying your time, it's buying your acquiescence to remain who you've always been. But here's the most insidious consequence. You begin to hate those who do change. Their transformation becomes a mirror, reflecting your own stagnation. Their success feels like an indictment of your choices. So you minimize their achievements, attribute their growth to luck or circumstances, anything to avoid confronting the truth. That change was always possible. You just chose not to. Your body keeps the score. The tension of living as a fraction of yourself manifests as chronic pain, digestive issues, insomnia. Your body is screaming what your mind won't acknowledge. This isn't working. This static existence is literally killing you, cell by cell, day by day. Time becomes your enemy. Each birthday isn't a celebration, but a reminder of another year spent as the same person. The years blur together because nothing distinguishes them. You're not creating memories, you're creating one long, monotonous memory of sameness. And perhaps cruelest of all, you begin to lose the ability to imagine being different. Your vision atrophies. Your dreams shrink to fit your current reality. You don't even know what you want anymore because wanting has become too painful. Better to expect nothing than to risk disappointment again. This is the silent catastrophe of non-change. Not dramatic failure, but gradual erosion. Not a bang, but a whimper. Not death, but something worse. A life that's indistinguishable from death. Animated by habit rather than purpose. But recognizing these consequences isn't meant to depress you. It's meant to wake you up. Because the moment you truly see the cost of staying the same, not intellectually but viscerally, something shifts. The pain of non-change finally outweighs the fear of transformation, and that's when the real journey begins. The prison of your unchanging self has one fatal flaw. It's made entirely of thoughts. And thoughts, no matter how solid they seem, are just weather patterns in the sky of consciousness. Screenshot this. It's about to save your life. Here's the first radical truth you need to understand. You don't need to become a better version of yourself. You need to realize that the self you're trying to improve is the problem. It's like trying to fix a mirage. The closer you look, the more it dissolves. The Zen masters had a saying, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. They weren't advocating violence. They were pointing to something profound. Any fixed image of who you should be, even an enlightened one, becomes another cage. The goal isn't to become someone else. It's to stop being someone altogether, to become a verb instead of a noun, a flowing instead of a frozen. 99% of you will misunderstand that. Read it until you don't. This is where most self-help fails spectacularly. It tells you to visualize your ideal self, to fake it until you make it, to affirm your way to transformation. But you can't think your way out of a problem that thinking created. You can't use the ego to transcend the ego. It's like trying to bite your own teeth. If that made you physically try it, you're starting to get it. Instead, consider what Viktor Frankl discovered in the concentration camps. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. But here's what most people miss about this quote. He's not talking about positive thinking. He's talking about something far more radical, the freedom to not be anyone at all, to exist in the space before identity forms. The rebellion begins with a simple but terrifying practice, catching yourself in the act of being yourself. Notice when you're playing your usual role. There I go again, being the responsible one. There's my victim story activating. Here comes my need to be right. Don't judge it. Don't try to change it. Just see it. The moment you see a pattern clearly, it begins to lose its power over you. Gurdjieff, the mystic philosopher, taught that humans are essentially machines running on automatic programs. But he also taught that there are moments, he called them shocks, when the machine stutters, when consciousness breaks through. These are your opportunities for rebellion. That moment when you're about to respond with your typical pattern and something in you hesitates, that's the crack in the matrix. Still here? Damn, you might actually be ready for this. Here's a practical experiment that will reveal how changeable you really are. For one day, reverse a fundamental pattern. If you're always early, be late. If you're a people pleaser, say no to everything. If you're aggressive, practice radical gentleness. Don't do this to become a different person. Do it to discover that your personality is just a collection of habits, and habits can be broken. I dare you to try this. Actually, I know you won't. Prove me wrong. The resistance you'll feel during this experiment is instructive. Your mind will scream that this isn't you. But that's exactly the point. The discomfort you feel isn't danger. It's the sensation of your psychological walls dissolving. It's the feeling of possibilities you've kept locked away for years, suddenly flooding back. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. But you've spent your life eliminating chaos, creating order, building routines that ensure no dancing stars can ever emerge. The rebellion requires you to court chaos, to deliberately destabilize your patterns. This doesn't mean becoming reckless. It means what the Stoics called voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing experiences that challenge your fixed identity. Take a cold shower if you're attached to comfort. Spend a day in silence if you're addicted to talking. Fast if you believe you can't survive without 3 meals. Each act of voluntary discomfort is a declaration of independence from your conditioned self. Stanford psychologists prove this works. But you'll probably just save this post and do nothing. Screenshot this next part. It's about to ruin your comfortable lies. Stop trying to change and start experimenting with being different. There's a crucial distinction here. Trying to change implies effort, struggle, a battle against what is. Experimenting implies play, curiosity, a scientist's detachment. You're not fighting your old self, you're simply testing what else might be possible. The philosopher Alan Watts understood this when he said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." Notice he didn't say plan the dance or master the dance. He said join it. This is the difference between change as conquest and change as surrender. Here's another experiment. For 1 week, make every decision based on what the version of you 5 years from now would choose. Not who you hope to be, but who you would be if you had already transformed. This isn't visualization, it's embodiment. You're not imagining change, you're practicing it. The cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman has proven that we don't see reality as it is. We see a user interface designed for survival. Your personality is just another interface. And like any interface, it can be redesigned. The question is, are you willing to be the designer instead of the user? This is where the rebellion gets dangerous to your ego, that is. Because once you start successfully being different, even for moments, a terrifying question emerges. If I can be anyone, who am I really? This vertigo of freedom is what Sartre called anguish, the dizzying realization that you're condemned to be free, that every excuse for staying the same is revealed as a choice. But within this anguish lies liberation. Because if you're not fundamentally anyone, if your identity is more fluid than fixed, then transformation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about stopping the pretense that you were ever someone fixed in the first place. The rebels who've walked this path before you didn't become better versions of themselves. They became fluid, adaptive, free. They learned to wear their personalities like clothes, appropriate to the situation, but never confused with their essence. They discovered that the self is not a problem to be solved, but a dance to be danced. And now, as you stand at the threshold of this rebellion, you face the same choice they faced. Continue the exhausting performance of being yourself, or step into the terrifying freedom of being no one in particular, and therefore potentially anyone at all. You've been asking the wrong question all along. It's not why don't people change, it's who is this person who believes they need to change. This is it, the thing that changes everything. Ready? Sit with that for a moment. Feel the vertigo of it. If your mind just went blank, that's your ego panicking. Good. Because the ultimate truth isn't about finding better strategies for transformation. It's about recognizing that the one who wants to change and the one who resists change are the same fiction. You've been watching a shadow puppet show, believing the puppets are real, never noticing your own hand creating the entire drama. This is what the mystics knew but couldn't say directly, what the philosophers circled around but never quite captured. There is no fixed self to change. There never was. What you call yourself is just a process, a verb masquerading as a noun, a river pretending to be a rock. Read that 10 times. I'm serious. Your life depends on understanding this. Consider what neuroscience has revealed. Your sense of being a continuous self is a construction. Your brain creates this illusion by stitching together moments of experience, like a film editor creating the impression of smooth motion from still frames. But between each frame, between each thought, each breath, each heartbeat, there's a gap. And in that gap, you don't exist. Not as the person you think you are. The Buddha's most dangerous teaching? You don't exist. No, really. Nay, he called it anatta, and it's about to blow your mind. It's the most hopeful message imaginable, because if there's no fixed self, then every moment is a birth. Every breath is a chance to be entirely new. The past has no hold on you except the hold you give it by believing in your own continuity. Here's what actually happens when people truly change. They don't become different. They stop believing in their sameness. They realize that the story of being an unchanging person is just that, a story. And like any story, it only has power as long as you keep telling it. Think about sleep. Every night you disappear entirely. The person you think you are vanishes for hours. No personality, no history, no problems, and yet every morning you reconstruct yourself from memory, habit, and expectation. You literally recreate your prison each dawn. But what if you didn't? What if you woke up and simply didn't pick up the old story? Think about that tonight when you go to sleep. If you can sleep after reading this is why genuine transformation often comes after a crisis, a loss, a moment when life strips away everything you thought you were. In these moments, the fiction becomes unsustainable. The performance breaks down, and in that breakdown, something extraordinary happens. You discover that you still exist. The essential you, the awareness reading these words right now, remains, even when everything you thought defined you falls away. Eckhart Tolle calls this the power of now. But even that phrase domesticates the reality. It's not just that the present moment has power. It's that the present moment is the only place you've ever actually existed. The past you and future you are ghosts, haunting a house that only exists in thought. So the ultimate rebellion isn't against your patterns, it's against the very idea that you are a pattern. It's the recognition that every identity is a case of mistaken identity. You are not your thoughts, your emotions, your history, your body, your roles. You are the space in which all these arise and pass away. You are the constant witness to your own constant change. This isn't philosophy, it's physics. At the quantum level, particles don't have fixed properties until they're observed. They exist in a state of pure potential. You are the same. Until you observe yourself as being a certain way, you exist in a state of infinite possibility. But the moment you say, I am, you collapse the wave function of your potential into a single limited reality. Quantum physicists at MIT confirmed this. You're not who you think you are. Literally. The tragic comedy is that you've been the magician all along, but you've been hypnotized by your own trick. You've forgotten that the chains are imaginary, that the cage has no lock, that the person trapped inside is just another character in the show. Here's the final key. Stop trying to escape the prison. Realize there is no prison. Stop trying to change the person. Realize there is no person. Stop trying to solve the problem. Realize you are not the problem. You are the space in which problems arise and dissolve. When you truly understand this, not intellectually but in your bones, something miraculous happens. Change stops being a struggle and becomes as natural as breathing, because you're no longer trying to change a fixed entity. You're simply allowing life to flow through you in new ways, to express itself through you in forms you haven't tried before. You become like water, taking the shape of whatever container you're in while remaining essentially formless. You can be professional in one moment, playful the next, profound when needed, silly when appropriate. Not because you're acting, but because you've stopped believing you're supposed to be only one way. This is the ultimate truth that makes all self-help obsolete. You don't need to become who you really are. You need to realize that who you really are is beyond becoming. You are the open space in which all possibilities exist. You are the silence between thoughts, the awareness behind the eyes reading these words, the consciousness that has witnessed every moment of your life without being touched by any of it. And from this recognition, a new kind of life becomes possible. Not a life of trying to change, but a life of continuous fluidity. Not a life of becoming someone better, but a life of being no one in particular and everyone in potential. Not a life of solving yourself, but a life of dissolving into the infinite creativity of existence itself. The cosmic joke is complete. The reason most people never change is because there's no one there to change. And the moment you realize this, you're free to be anything, or nothing, or everything. The question now isn't whether you'll change. The question is, will you continue pretending to be the same? Will you keep playing the role of the person who can't change? Or will you finally laugh at the absurdity of it all and step into the freedom you've always been? Last chance. Share this now or stay trapped forever. Your ego is already working to make you forget everything you just read. Look around. The prison walls you've spent so long trying to escape were never there. The guard you've been fighting was your own reflection. The person you've been trying to change was a ghost story you've been telling yourself in the dark. You have two choices now. Share this and change, or scroll past and stay dead. Your move. Welcome to the end of the person you thought you were, and the beginning of whatever you choose to be in this moment, and the next, forever. You have 10 seconds before your brain erases this. Share it, save it, or lose it forever. The comment section will show who's ready to change and who's addicted to their excuses. Which one are you?